Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a game from penultimate round of the Lausanne Women's Grand Prix taking place at the moment, and it's between the two women that played the World Championship match recently, which was tied in the classical portion, and then the defending champion Wenjun won it in the playoff. It was very closely contested. So in this particular game, Goryachkina had the white pieces. The standings before the game, she was half behind the leader, Zagnidza, and Wenjun is on 4 out of 9. So in the game, it began with d4, and we had knight f6 and c4, e6, knight c3, and d5. We've got another queen's gambit. Looks like the exchange line, cd5, but black avoids it, heads for the semi-Tarrasch instead. e4, knight c3, b takes c3, c5, knight f3. So white has gained a good centre, but black is sort of aiming to trade pieces and then hopes to attack the centre herself. cd4, cd4, bishop b4 check. This is all standard theory in the line. Bishop d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2. Castles, and now the bishop on the active square, c4, intending to support the d5 break. Knight to d7, castles for white. Black develops the bishop on b7, rook a d1, bishop to b7, and now rook f to e1. So white's grouping nicely in the centre, but she'll have to decide exactly how she's going to play this once everything's mobilised. So first rook c8, gaining a tempo on the bishop, bishop to b3, and rook e8. So black's sort of shoring up the defence and perhaps maybe giving f8 possibly to the knight later. h3, h6, and now rook to e3. So we're still following games that have been played before. Knight f6, attacking e4 twice, only protected by the rook, so white has to do something. And Goryachkina played queen e2, and now rook c7. So the idea is that the rook can help to defend on the second rank, or perhaps play the queen here, possibly, and sort of put more pressure against white's centre this way. So now Goryachkina made a pawn break in the centre with d5, which is the sort of thematic way that white plays this position. And then after the reply ed5, you then advance e5, so it's a pawn sacrifice, but it gives a strong attack. The idea is eventually to play, perhaps to try and push e6 and further weaken the black king. But for the time being, black has to decide what to do with her knight. And she chose knight h5, which is the move that's been played before, and now rook d4, which keeps the knight cut off for now because it covers the f4 square, and therefore white's threatening g4, and then there's the knight can't be saved. So you played g6, which gives the knight a retreat square on g7, and now queen d2, sort of now eyeing the new weakened square on h6. And this has still been played before. Now we had queen e7, which may be, I don't have the most complete database in the world, but it might be the first new move. I think the move that's been played before is actually knight back and regrouping the knight that way. But you played queen e7, and now knight h2. Quite interesting, you can sort of, if you want to go all in, is just to sort of sacrifice again here, which makes it 2 pawns, and then after takes, then to sort of target this square, because these 2 pawns are weak, and the idea is to well, one idea is to sort of attack with this, but maybe first to go bishop here, which brings the bishop onto a superb looking diagonal here, and then also the knight can hop into e5. And it's not so easy for black to defend the g6 square, because knight e5 is coming, and perhaps also then rook g4, and would be piling up on the g4 on the g6 square. You can't play this immediately. Well, you could, but it drops the exchange. Maybe black would do something like this against that, but then knight e5 gives white a reasonable initiative, and this bishop is not participating so much in this area of the board, thanks to the 2 pawns here and here, which white has sort of enticed onto those squares. So it's an interesting idea, but it's not one you'd play without preparation, I think. And then knight h2, so intending to come to g4 and target the h6 pawn. We've already got the queen lined up there as well. So now we had excellent reply queen c1, and the idea is to slow down white's attack due to the threat of queen c1, and we can trade the queens off. So Aleksandra prevented that with rook e1, and again a good move, queen c3. This time making white. White doesn't want to trade the queens because then her attack would fizzle out. And in the meantime, she's got to keep both the rooks protected, and hence queen to d1. And now the interesting rook e c8, perhaps intending something like queen b2, and then rook to c1, and then we can trade off some pieces along the back rank here. But now Goryachkina took advantage of the opportunity to play e6, and aiming to get rid of this pawn, which will then weaken the one on g6, which is sort of one of white's targets. This is why the position is a little bit difficult for black, because these pawns are advanced, and it gives white some targets. So now knight f6, regrouping the knight. So Goryachkina immediately decided to trade this off. Knight takes g4, rook takes g4, and now black has to do something now about the threat to take here. She doesn't really want to have to take back with the king, and if she took with the rook, then g6 will be on Prix. Again, this same weakness. So she played the move king g7 to defend. Perhaps it's a bit safer to play something like this, because then the king isn't so exposed, and then after ef7, rook f7, something like rook e6, black could always sort of try and bail out here with queen c1 and defend an endgame, which looks to be okay. For example, the move white wants to play, really, rook g6, doesn't seem to work because of queen d1, bishop d1, and now the pin along the back rank. This sort of prevents white from doing anything. For example, if right, first thing to say is you can't come back here because the rook is on Prix, and if you try and get the rook from being attacked with check, black can keep attacking it with king g7, and if you go back again, simply keep hitting the rook. There's no way out of this for white, and if you played that move, then it doesn't help because now the bishop's dropping. That would be winning for black. So perhaps king h7 is a better defense, but we'll see. King g7 was played. After ef7, rook f7, rook e6. There's now this defense with queen c1 is not so good this time, because after rook g6, it's check straight away. Obviously, if you go king h7, then simply You can just take and then, well, maybe go check again. King f8, and then after takes, King h2. It's true that black can take this, but then the resulting position should be good for white with the two connected passed pawns here on the queen side. Perhaps white would start with rook h7, hitting the bishop. This just looks like a really good position for white. And if you play, in the game g5 was played, which by you, which was the best move, but rook f6 doesn't work because of rook e7 hitting the bishop. And after rook f7, white doesn't have to take on f7. She can play rook g6, crashing through, because after king takes, there's queen g4 check. And now, it's just a simple win for white. King f6 runs into queen e6 and taking the rook. The king's wide open, and the same after king back. It's just rook f7, king here, where you can always just take the bishop if you want to, or play queen g6. Either way, it's no good for black. So g5 was forced, and now king h2, which was, probably a really it's a really difficult move, and maybe the sort of star move in the game in a way. Even though black still has defensive possibilities, but it's a difficult position for black because the threat is to sort of play h4 and attack on the g5 point. So it's difficult for black to defend. h4 straight away perhaps doesn't looks like it should be good, but then it allows black to play queen c1. This sort of this line we keep coming up against of black trying to trade queens when she's under attack. And after, say, hg5, again, it's not so easy for white to play, and she's still a pawn down at the moment, and black has adequate counterplay here. So Goryachkina found the better move, king h2, delaying the idea of h4. And now we had queen c7 check. It's a good defensive move, bringing the queen back. If the king comes to the back rank, then then we just simply start doing the same thing again. So therefore, rook g3 was played, and perhaps the intention is h4, and now rook c2 f8, which is a good move, coordinating the rooks and bringing this rook to the king's defense. So now we had queen d4 check, rook f6, and h4. And in this position, this is where you played short of time, I think, played queen c5, which after queen e5 leaves the position hopeless for black. Actually, there was no defense. She may have just overlooked the strength of queen e5. But queen f4 is a better way to defend, and she probably still is okay here. I mean, even though it looks really dicey, but for example, after queen f4, because I don't think there's anything better than queen f4, because otherwise d4 can come. And then after rook f4, hg5, hg5, rook g5. And then king f7 hitting the rook on e6. And I think that therefore white should be, black might be able to pick up the pawn on f2. After something like rook e2, we can attack that. I mean, it's probably a good ending for white, but it's not obvious that it's good. And after rook d2, bishop to c4, black has defensive chances. But in the game, like I say, she played queen to c5, was played by you, and then queen e5, and now there's no answer to the threat to take on g5, and the sort of deadly pin against the rook is on here as well. d4 was played. If bishop c8, then white can simply play, because there's no other way out. The idea of bishop c8 is to try and drive the rook away, because otherwise white just takes on g5 anyway. But then after takes hg5, queen takes g5 check. This is hopeless, because after king there, which you need to do to keep the rook protected, queen g7, again you must play king e6 to keep the rook protected. And now finally rook e3, and well, the king can't abandon the rook, and if king f5, there's rook f3 winning the rook anyway. So bishop c8 doesn't work. You played d4, and then came the really nice move hg5, because if black takes here, then white doesn't take on e5. Of course, you can play here, which is double check from the rook and the pawn, which obliges black to move the king. If you're in double check, there's no way out but to move the king. And after king moves, then rook takes e5. White's rook up. So therefore, hg5 was played. But now the white king is too open, so she can't go to the can't go this way, because then well, it's instant checkmate. Either piece takes on that square. You played king to h8, and then rook h5 check, king g7. So at the moment she's covering the g5 square, so this can be met by queen g5, and then black survives. But unfortunately, the much stronger move, which was found by Aleksandra, which was queen g3 check, and in this position, Wenjun resigned the game, because if she plays, well, the only move you can do, king f7, as I'm sure you can see, there's a checkmate in one, and that is rook to h7, because the rook here is protected by the bishop. So a very forthright attack, very strong attack, which you defended very well up to the point when she played queen c5, and that game throws the tournament wide open, because Goryachkina caught up with Sagnidze, who you'll remember was ahead of her by half. Sagnidze actually did really well to draw her game. I think she had black against Kashlinskaya and was in trouble early on in the game, but defended very resourcefully. So now we're going to round 11, the last round. The two leaders actually face each other. Sagnidze's got the white pieces, and Goryachkina the black. So an entertaining game and a difficult tournament for Wenjun. So thank you very much for watching, and hope you enjoyed the game. If you did, it would be nice, please, if you give a like or a thumbs up or whatever it's called, or a subscribe, would be great. Thank you very much indeed. Bye now.